No emergency drills are planned. In the event of a fire or other emergency, you should vacate the building in an orderly manner through the nearest available exit. And verbal communication provided when we're broadcasting.
You're not live, Chair.
Thank you. So, welcome to this meeting of Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. Agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available through the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph or record our public meeting, providing that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. Anyone? No? Thank you. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Thank you. So joining us remotely today, we have online Zoe Richards. Hi Zoe, can you see and hear us?
I can, thank you very much, yes.
Thank you for joining. So you are Head of Service for Starting Well.
Right.
Great. Any members of the committee or co-optees with voting rights? Sorry.
Emily Lowe as well, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Emily, I didn't see you there. Hello, Emily, can you see and hear us?
I can, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. And you're Head of Service for Business Support and Performance, yeah?
Talk Community,
Talk.
Councillor Fagan, I've returned to my substantive.
Ah, okay. Thank you. And thanks for joining us. Right. Any members of the committee or co-optees with voting rights can join the meeting remotely. They're not able to vote on any resolutions of the committee, but may otherwise participate in the debate. But I don't think we have any members online. So we have a number of officers and other attendees present, and I think I'll actually ask you to introduce yourselves now. I think we'll just do some introductions round the room. We also have Lauren Rogers as a guest from Rural Media. Thank you very much for joining us. And I think it would be useful when you introduce yourself if you can just briefly explain your role and your contribution to this meeting, where we're looking at the voice of young people, children and young people within council policy. If I can just put some context to the topic of the meeting. We've had a lot of discussion over the past year and a half about the voice of children and young people, and this has largely been confined to the area of social care. But it's become increasingly evident that actually the voice of young people in developing policy in Herefordshire is really important. We've, in the past couple of months, and thank you councillors that did attend, we did manage to go to the Ledbury listening event, which was put on by Rural Media, and Lauren will speak a little bit more about that. I've also managed to attend the City Youth Council, and thank you very much to Callum Dover for facilitating that conversation, and to the youth councillors who were very delighted to speak to me. I've also managed to attend the citizenship class at the Steiner Academy, and that was very informative. Transport came up a lot in that conversation, access to buses. It was an interesting conversation, and thank you very much to all of the all of you who've agreed to attend this meeting. So if we can start at the very top, and we'll just work our way around. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Julia Stevens, and I'm a Public Health Lead and Commissioner. So in relation to today's discussions, myself and colleagues are responsible for commissioning some health services, specifically some that relate to children and young people, such as sexual health services in Herefordshire, 0 to 19 public health nursing services. So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lauren Rogers from Rural Media. Councillor Fagan, would you like me to talk a little bit now, or just...
Possibly just after we've done the introductions and I finish off the
course.
script, and then I'll come back to you. Thank you, Lauren.
So I'm a project manager for rural media, and we run a lot of youth listening programmes around the county and work nationally with marginalised communities.
Hi, I'm Jess Caria. I'm the Head of Corporate Performance and Intelligence. So questions regards to consultations, a part of that falls within my service. But also I have a team, the Children's Young People Performance Team, and they also do all the workflows on Mosaic, which is a case management system used by social workers, in which we do capture children's voice as well. So that might be of interest to you.
Good afternoon all, Rosie Thomas Easton. I'm the Director for Transformation and Strategy, newly joined at Herefordshire Council. In my remit sits performance, so working with Jess and her team, communications, also IT and digital and customer services as well. So in relation to what we're discussing today, really keen to explore and understand how we can work with children and young people to inform our corporate transformation strategy, but also think about the work that's happening in the service areas critical to the engagement of children and young people as well.
Hello everybody, it's Siobhan Riddle and Acting Strategic Planning Manager and Neighbour Planning. So my remit is primarily with the local plan and neighbourhood planning, and it's covering the plan for the next 20 years. So all things regarding development of housing, open space, environmental matters. So all of those looking to the future. So we have involved young people in our consultation back in March to May time, and had events which we attended that they could feed into. So we were interested to know, because obviously looking to the future, 20 years time, they'll be all adults and living and working perhaps in the community. So we want to hear what they've got to say. Thank you.
Good afternoon everyone, I'm Dr. Dave Land, Head of Transport and Access Services, and I think the specific transport area that we're looking at for this is how and whether we can get better at consulting with young people in terms of our strategic transport plan. So local transport plan is our key one, but we've also got the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. We've done some engagement exercises and I've set them out in the text of the report. But so I think we've done an okay job. Absolutely, we could do better. So I think there's a lot of, I'm sure, recommendations that we'll take forward about how do we work with colleagues to make that voice much stronger. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Tilly Page, the Complaints and Children's Rights Manager. I manage the Hear Me Children's Rights and Advocacy Service. We support young people to have their voices heard within children's services and ensure they understand their rights and entitlements.
Afternoon everybody, my name's Tina Russell. I am the Interim Director of Children's Services.
Hi everybody, Ivan Powell, Cabinet Member for Children's Services.
Okay, we've got the Simon Can, the Democratic Services Officer, and Daniel Webb, the Scrutiny Officer, and the Democratic Services Support Team. Thank you. I'm Tony Fagan. I chair the Children's Scrutiny Committee.
Elizabeth Harvey, Vice Chair of the committee.
I'm Ben Proctor. I'm a mere member of the committee.
I'm Councillor Robert Highfield. I have a few other strings to my bow. I'm parent of an adopted child. I'm also a homeschooler. I've homeschooled 2 of my children, so that's relevant to part of this.
Hello, Claire Davis on this committee.
Frank Hornthwaite, just come onto this committee for the, I think, although I've stood in a couple of times, now I am a member. And the main aim for me is to ensure that young people in care and others that we're responsible for have the same opportunities that my 16 grandchildren have. I'm passionate about the welfare of children, and I think looking at grandchildren, you see a lot of it through those eyes.
David Davis, committee member, also vice chair of a board of governors of one of the local schools.
Thank you very much, everyone. Can I just ask, have we had any apologies for absence?
We received apologies for absence from Jan Francis, the co-opted family representatives member.
Thank you, and I assume there have been no other apologies, so we don't have any named substitutes at the moment. Just in terms of the committee, I'd just like to say that we have lost our committee member Sam Pratley, who's been the diocese representative for a few years, and I would just like to thank him for his contributions to this committee, and also Sylvia Cockcroft from the Archdiocese. So we will be looking at our co-optees on this committee. Can I ask if there are any declarations of interest, please? Do we have no committee members who have a declaration of interest in respect to the agenda item? No? Okay, thank you. So we'll move to the minutes. Can we approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of September 2024? Has anybody got any proposed corrections? I haven't heard anything from anyone. So can we please agree that the minutes of the meeting of the 17th of September be agreed as a correct record? And I'll sign the minutes. Is everybody happy to agree on that? Yep. Thank you very much. So questions from members of the public. Have we received any written questions from members of the public?
One question from a member of the public was received. The question and response has been published as a supplement to the agenda for this meeting on the Herefordshire Council website.
Thank you. And are there any supplementary questions from members of the public?
No supplementary questions received.
Thank you. So if we move to questions from members of the council, have we received any written questions from members of the council?
None were received.
Okay, thank you. Right, so if we move to the main agenda item, which is the voice of children and young people within policy within Herefordshire Council. So as I explained in the introduction to the meeting, for quite a while we've been talking about the voice of children and young people within the social care context. But actually, if we think about the role that young people play in our society, the importance of their voice, I think the participation of young people in any context matters so much that it's written into the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which states that children have the right to give their opinions freely on issues that affect them. Adults should listen and take children seriously. And this is actually taken from one of the pages that is on the Herefordshire Safeguarding Children Partnership Participation Toolkit. It's a really important point, and that's why we brought it here today. We've also brought Lauren Rogers to the meeting to actually discuss how some of this work is done outside of the council. And I think, Lauren, that's quite a good opportunity for you just to explain the role of rural media in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've written some notes so I can stick to those. So Rural Media is a Herefordshire-based charity and social enterprise with a 30-year track record of empowering communities to share stories and make their voices heard. Our work focuses on access to creative expression, to inclusivity and tackling inequalities, especially in rural areas. We are not a youth club, we are not solely a youth work organisation. Our motto, if you like, is improving lives through creativity and supporting communities to use their voice for positive change. An example of this ethos is the Point of View project, which is something I project manage and have done for about 3-4 years now. The initiative is funded by Esme Fairbairn Foundation. We are their only rural project in their national portfolio. We've engaged approximately 3,500 young people up to the age of 25 across Herefordshire over the last 3.5 years. The objective, in a nutshell, is empowering all young people to find their voice, equipping them with skills and platforms to express that voice, their views and their needs, and crucially connect them with decision makers. And we often use the phrase people in positions of power and power sharing. We seek to support young people to meet decision makers in their spaces and encourage decision makers to listen and respond. So because we're a creative organisation, that often looks like developing filmmaking and storytelling skills. We might be creating exhibitions with young people. We might be making podcasts which explore their local experiences. We might be supporting them to speak directly and do presentations to parish and town councils. Can often be quite hyper-local social issues that young people are interested in, or it might be very open global issues or their hopes for the future. As I said, we work with all young people, and that has included young people who are engaged with children's services, care leavers, care experienced, homeschooled, etc. So Rural Media's worked to empower young people for 3 decades. We work with all ages, but POV, as we call it, has really become our method and the cornerstone for how we nurture young voices in our home county. The example I wanted to share was a piece of work we've done this year in collaboration with a handful of Ledbury organisations and with Talk Community, who helped us instigate this. It was called Ledbury Listening, and that piece of work used creative consultation to reach around 700 8 to 18-year-olds who are growing up in and around Ledbury. Some of them go to school in Ledbury, some of them live in Ledbury. And we were very open in our conversations. We simply wanted to uncover their experiences, their ambitions, and their ideas for shaping the town's future. So when we use the phrase creative consultation, to us, that means often combining what might be seen as a traditional survey, often online, and we will often do 10 to 12 questions maximum, with plenty of room for individual comments. A lot of rich data comes out through comments. We combine the surveys with creative pop-up sessions. So we use local spaces where we might use rich picturing, audio recording, poetry, just doing creative things together, making magazines, portrait photography. Basically, we have a lot of fun. And crucially, we always also have group and one-to-one conversations with young people about how they're feeling and what they want to say. Ledbury has been really successful for us, outcomes-wise. From our report, which was co-produced with young people, there is now a youth council being formed in collaboration between John Masefield High School and Ledbury Town Council. In terms of town council policy changes, 2 of the recommendations have been adopted already. They're repairing a tyre swing, which sounds small and incremental, but is crucially important to young people and their view on what's available for them locally. And councillors have pledged to involve young people when Ledbury Town Council has planning decision discussions. There's also more facility access that's come out of this work, so young people can use spaces in the high school and in a couple of community hubs. So I won't go on anymore, but that kind of localised creative intervention, which is something we've honed and absolutely could still be improved. We're always learning. But I think what's I wanted to add is it is inspiring to do some similar work in our other market towns, and we've also been working closely with Hereford City Youth Council to speak to 150 Hereford-based young people about safety, about transport, about their ambitions and their access to employment. As I say, the key for us is using creativity and using fun and finding ways in young people's spaces to just let them have their say, and then, crucially, connecting them with people in positions of power. And I think we work from both sides to kind of meet everyone in the middle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lauren. And I think that it's important also just to note that Rural Media do some work with Herefordshire Council and probably will do some in the future, just to
Yes, we're active we're grant recipients at the moment. Safer Communities Fund, we're very fortunate to have that funding, and also some Share Prosperity Fund. So we apply for grants quite regularly from Herefordshire Council and from other trusts and foundations.
That's brilliant. And I think the importance of bringing Lauren to this meeting is to look at how we can actually collaborate across the county to actually get the best for our young people, to make sure that their voices are included in many different ways. And I think that we're at an interesting time in Herefordshire where we're going through a massive transformation. We also know that the voice of young people is really important. We are exploring how we may potentially become a child-friendly Herefordshire, and just yesterday the leader, the chief executive, the director, the cabinet member, Councillor Harvey, and myself met with Coventry City Council and Leeds City Council to look at child-friendly Cov, and which is a campaign to ensure that Coventry is a child and young people friendly city where young people feel valued, supported, and enjoy themselves. And the aim is to make Coventry the best place in the UK for children and young people to live and grow up in. Now, I suggest that we actually challenge that and say that Herefordshire is the best place for young people to live and grow up in. And so that's the reason for this meeting. And I do hope that people will sort of put their hands up and contribute where they feel that best they can do. But that is the reason to bring you all together. And I know it is a scrutiny committee, but I think that collaboration is absolutely the key to this. So if I could just start and then we'll move to Councillor Proctor and then Councillor Harvey and any other councillors who wish to ask questions, or anybody that would like to contribute, please do just put your hand up. So looking at the documents that we've had and the sort of role and coordination of consultation and engagement, and we can see that there's some really good practice within the social care sphere and the special educational needs that they've managed to capture the voice of children, young people, or to set out a strategy to capture that voice really well. So what we're looking at is how the learnings and best practices are shared within and across. Sorry, I'm just actually, that is your line of questioning, and I've moved, sorry. I'm just looking at what innovative engagement methods have been sort of proven really effective and how they've been applied. And I'm wondering if there are any sort of officers who can actually sort of say what has been the best approach in terms of best practice. Has anybody got views? Lauren, maybe one if you've got some views on how young people engage best.
I don't start my conversations with the let's talk about planning or transport quite often, to be honest. But an example is a project that we ran a couple of years ago. It was called Razom, which means together in Ukrainian. And that was a filmmaking project. And it was obviously about community integration. And we co-produced a film with a group of young people who were a mix of Hereford-born and young people who'd come from Ukraine to flee the war. And it was up to that group of 25 young people what the film was about, where they made it, how they shot it, etc. But it met those the objectives of the Ukrainian integration scheme. So again, it's kind of using creativity as a tool rather than this is a project about friendship and about how you use your voice. But through that, they obviously gained a huge amount of technical and transferable skills. So from rural media's perspective, which is all I can talk from, it's giving young people an opportunity to do something quite unique, quite unusual that they can't necessarily access through education or through homeschooling or through other avenues. And we have a participation funnel, so it's a model where we make that opportunity available to the largest number as possible, and then young people will put themselves forward to take part. I think often you'll hit those bigger numbers by doing smaller pieces of intervention work with smaller groups, and you'll get a stronger relationship with those young people. A lot of the young people we start working with are kind of 11 to 14, but they'll often stay with rural media and come back for opportunities up until the age of 20, 25 and on.
Thank you. And is there a mechanism within Herefordshire in which that information that piece of work that you've done with young people is shared with the council or with the safeguarding partnership or sort of with other authorities? Do we have that mechanism in place at the moment?
We often, in truth, rely on our kind of existing network of Herefordshire contacts, and that can be through formal routes like HVOS has a youth forum, and around that table are probably 60 odd organisations, often third sector organisations. We will work with pupil referral units direct, because it comes down to relationships a lot of the time. You know, we know the leads of these organisations, and we will put out lots of information. What we wouldn't do is solely rely on putting something through only school or only on social media. We use an awful lot of techniques. Promoting any opportunity is difficult, especially to young people, but you've got to find the spaces where they're at.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just wondering, from the council perspective, how does the council evaluate inclusivity and effectiveness of consultations with children and young people, especially those that are harder to reach? Is that something that the intelligence units are involved in?
So yes, to a limited degree. So in terms of consultations, we play a part in that when services approach us about a particular consultation, they will come to us with an idea, and if it involves an online survey, we use something called Snap in order to set that survey up. But really, we advise on the questions that should be asked to make sure it's tailored to the audience that those questions need to be answered by. So, for example, we will advise on the questions that we should be asking children, young people, to make sure it's engaging at that level. But also we consider, so for instance, in the Children's Quality of Life survey and the Health and Wellbeing survey, we specifically asked our consultants, so it's an external organisation, to in any tender that whenever we commission consultants on research, that they be clear about the methodology that they will be using to ensure that we have a representative sample. So, for instance, if there is a hard to reach community that we want to try to make sure we capture their views, we will ask them what methodology they will be using to satisfy that. And so, for example, in the talk community, one of the concerns we had was about making sure we reach those areas of deprivation. So we use quota sampling and make sure that we use screening questions and ask for like postcodes and that sort of thing to see whether we are capturing their views. And if not, we will try to make sure that we constantly sort of put out those messages to say, here's a survey, want to hear your views, and make that, that sort of marketing where we use comms. So we work closely with the comms within the council and the website as well, and social media to promote these surveys that we do. So we do have a part to play. I'm sure we'll come to this at some point. There isn't a central coordination of consultations, however. So that is something that has pros and cons to it, though. So I'm sure we'll discuss that shortly.
Thank you. And does the council ensure that there are feedback loops to demonstrate how children and young people's contributions have been used? So one of the things that came out at the City Youth Council was that they feel that as a group they're sort of over-consulted about things, and then they don't actually sort of hear anything else. So the impression I got from them was that they actually feel quite powerless, actually, because they're contributing something, and then as far as they see, nothing changes. So it's quite disillusioning.
So that I would say one of the cons of not having a central coordination, because we're very much led by the services in terms of they will seek out our views on a design of a survey, and we may provide some advice, well, here's a way that we can capture this particular demographic, their viewpoint. But ultimately, it then goes back to the service in terms of those results. But there is no sort of sharing between the services across the council in terms of the results of the consultation. It's very much on a case-by-case basis. A service asks us to ask for our assistance on a consultation. We provide that assistance. It goes back to the survey in terms of the service, in terms of any analysis that they may request for, and then it stays there. It's not shared, and I think that's something that we need to improve upon.
So I think, Rosie, that's probably quite a good sort of segue for the transformation of services in the council.
I think that's absolutely right, Chair, and some of my reflections as we're talking is that there are some really strong examples across our services within the council where we have started to establish much stronger feedback loops in relation to engagement activity. Now, some of that is within adult social care, some of that's within talk community, effectively different models and methodologies of doing a bit of a you said, we did, in terms of we've come to talk to you, we're keen to get your views in relation to an issue, you've participated, given your time, given your energies to talk to us, making sure that we go back as services, as a council together to say, first and foremost, thank you for the time that you've contributed. This is how we are going to use your feedback in relation to how we shape and model our services for whichever segment of the community that we're talking about. But I think there's a lot of learning that we can take from other aspects of the organisation to support the work that we do in children's. We are getting much better in relation to how it is we shape our consultation and engagement activities. At the planning stage, we involve relevant services and related services. So we do have those opportunities at planning stages for colleagues to say, we've had similar conversations with groups of children and young people or other segments of the community around related projects. Let's get together and have a look at the feedback from there. What further questions do we need to ask? How do we need to ask these questions differently in order to fulfil our engagement and consultation needs so that we're hearing views? So we have taken some really good steps forward, I believe, in relation to how we approach our planning and our feedback. And there's certainly aspects of learning that we can take from corporately and wider across the organisation that would translate beautifully to children's services.
Thank you. I think quite a good example of that is the local plan consultation, and I know that local plan consultation is very difficult for anybody to sort of grasp. But I think the numbers in terms of respondees was really quite low, and I think that it's a dense document to engage with, and perhaps there's a different way for information around place shaping and young people's views on that to feed into local plan consultation, perhaps. Right. Is there evidence that exists that publicising consultations through schools is effective, sort of across the demographics? Is that good practice, or is it something we can build on? Does anybody want to respond to that? Maybe
Just to, in regards to those who are homeschool learning, that's a demographic that we are looking to try and ensure we capture their views. So, for example, again, at the Quality of Life survey, we have a different link to the generic link that goes out to those who are schooled at home to complete that survey. And that's because some of the questions aren't necessarily relevant if they don't go to school. So, for example, bullying at school won't be relevant to them. So we make sure that the questions are relevant to them, and also we have we will ensure that they are informed of the survey at multiple occasions, so that they don't miss that opportunity much more frequently than we would do normally via school.
Thank you. Siobhan, did you want to come in on that question?
It was just a minor point, really, about engaging with the head teacher probably months in advance to tell them that you've got this big survey coming along, which is what we did with the Hereford Sixth Form. And with a bit of toing and froing about organising, the survey that we were going to be doing and talking to the students in the college, it was just a little bit of a build-up is probably needed, and rather than coming in cold with, here's the survey, help us fill it in, there's a QR code. It just needs more of a human touch to the process.
Lauren, thank you. Thanks, Siobhan. Lauren, you had a point?
Yes, just to really echo that, we will often start 6 to 12 months before we want to do a piece of work, because you've got to whet the appetite, I suppose. And also, the last thing you want to be viewed as is extractive. I think that's often what happens, because I think our young people are smart cookies, and they need to know that this isn't just information being taken from them and used for a service that they might not necessarily engage with all the time. So I think we always start our conversations with how can our young people get something from this process, as well as us or whoever we're sharing the data with. That's kind of the ethos and we've learnt that over the last 3 years. We didn't start that way, but we've learnt that quite quickly.
Thank you. I'll just have a look. Councillor Davis, yes.
Could I just ask a question about those children who fall off the grid, the marginalised children? What's in process to follow that up?
So marginalised in what way? Because obviously there could be multiple different areas of interest. When it comes to, for instance, those who are living in perhaps deprived areas, we look at postcodes and make sure that we put communications out in those particular areas, local areas, to ask them to engage with whatever it is that we're consulting them on. But also, I guess in terms of like, for instance, those children that aren't in a school environment, who are homeschooled, we, again, the process that I just mentioned is something we do. But there might be other areas that we are falling short on, and that we're happy to learn from that. So what we are going to be doing going forward is considering whether we need to revise our consultation guidance document in the council, which is now 6 years old. So I've recently been appointed, so that would be one of my sort of on my to-do list to have a look at, to see whether we ought to be doing more. So very much willing to listen to the outcomes of this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this leads to the next question, which is how does the council build capacity, for example, training and resources for qualitative and participatory methods of co-production? So I think that there probably are good examples, again, within the SEN team and the kind of social care element, but do we have that sort of those resources and training out with those teams? Rosie, sorry, Tina, did you want to come in?
Just to clarify the questions, within the services, within the children's services, we have some specific capacity around children in care, but for the rest of the services, we don't have additional capacity or additional training. Obviously, these are children's workforce, and so the ability to communicate with children is part usually of their experience and their training anyway. But we don't have additional capacity. It's seen and very much built in as part of the job. So, you know, all of the ways that we use, whether it be development of surveys that we write, how we send them out and we get them back, you know, whether it be right from me right down to frontline team managers, we do that as part of our role and part of our jobs. I mean, I was pleased with the report in terms of seeing how so many other non-children's services areas have really embraced and tried to make sure that they do engage with children and young people. But what it shows is that there is no one method, there is no one way, you know, there is no one easy target group of children. You know, you have to have opportunities at lots and lots of different times for children, often it will depend on what it is you are engaging or consulting on. Sometimes it's right to do it at the time. I know, you know, from my experience with children, depending on what you're looking at, it is right to do it at the time that they're experiencing a service because that's meaningful to them. For other children and young people, it might be something that they want to give you their information on well after the time. For example, we're targeting some children and young people who have experienced exploitation. That's not right for them at the time to be asking them about what services did and didn't work for them. That's the wrong time to be asking them, but they give us feedback in a different way about how they're feeling at the time. But going back to them when they become young adults and saying, actually, when you were 14, 15 and we did services, what worked for you? That's been, you know, I've done that previously and we're doing that now, and that was a really useful piece of work. Sometimes it's informing something in advance. I think, as Lauren said, sometimes it is engaging children and young people to talk about services that they have experienced or might. Sometimes it's just they may never come across this specific service, but they're a children and young person and their views would be valuable to informing it as a wider council. So there is such a range, and it's important that we have that range in place. You mentioned earlier, and you've said in the questions, you know, about the, you know, do we have a central team? Do all of these surveys go back to the, whether it be the performance team or a specific place, like you mentioned, the safeguarding board? No, And I would be really concerned that we don't create a situation that we think is going to be a good thing by having a central team or a central wet place where all of the ways that we communicate with children have to funnel through. Because if we do that, we risk bottlenecking and we risk limiting people's innovative ideas about how they can engage as a specific service area on a specific topic with either a targeted group or the general children and young people's population. So but ensuring ourselves, which you're doing through this report, that that activity is taking place, I think is really valuable. But I would urge caution at the idea that if we have a single team or one or two people that are going to coordinate all of that, that's going to be great. Because, as I say, I think that there's risks, there's inherent risks within that. And not all of the surveys that are undertaken need to know about each other. That's kind of in my world, that's, it's for what added value, my question would be. You know, it is important that these opportunities and engagements take place. It's important that we're assured that they are taking place. I felt assured by this. There's always more we can do and developments that we can make. But yeah, that would be my view in terms of, you know, making sure that we are engaging. And like you say, you know, we are maybe wanting to do a piece of work around child-friendly Herefordshire, and that's going to need some capacity and some coordination to do that. And that might be a specific thing that we want to look at whether or not we can add some additional capacity in for a period of time. But generally for me it would be about having that guidance in place and making sure we do the regular assurances that these activities are taking place and people are aware of them. But I felt, as a children's service director, assured that the counterparts across the council were very much thinking children, and the more we develop child-friendly Herefordshire, the more that will be on everybody's lips, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor, you had some questions?
Yes, I have questions under the heading of role and coordination of consultation and engagement, so this flows on nicely. I guess, so I hear what you're saying about what you don't want to do is create a pipe, and that makes sense. What I didn't see in this report is what is the council's expectation of a service manager. So how does a service manager know that they have met the kind of requirements, and is there someone's job to, I guess, starting from the political level, whose job is it to set those expectations, and where is that reflected in the council?
There is a consultation guidance document, and that's on our internal staff intranet. We don't do enough to promote that document, and I do not believe at the moment that we have anything specific to do with children and young people within that guidance document, but it is due to be revised, and that is something that my service can revise. Happy to take on that responsibility. But having said that, like I echo what Tina said, that we do need to ensure it's not just formal consultations when we're seeking out the views of children and young people. Is our day-to-day work, especially if you're a social worker, of course, but also any other person in the council who has contact with children and young people, is ensuring that their views are heard on a daily basis, as opposed to only when we're formally consulting. So I think that also needs to be considered as well.
That sounds great. But that sort of picks up one thing that came up to me a bit in this report. Is we asked about how the voices of children and young people are being reflected in services, and often what's in the report is about consultation. Now, that's only one way that we can hear that, and in a kind of ladder of participation, that's comparatively low down. And there are times consultation is also a phenomenon in local government which has more or less influence attached to it. And I think I'm looking for a guidance document or a policy or something that kind of widens this out and helps managers think about all of this complexity that we've described. And I don't know if we have one and whether it would be useful.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think it would be useful. There's a question here about the difference between engagement, consultation, and co-production, and I think that's a very valid point, and we need to be clear about that. And engagement for me is also feedback, and it's a piece of work that we've just done actually in children's around being clear that participation and engagement isn't the same as getting service user feedback on the experience that the young person's had from the service that they've received. I think that guidance on consultation is exactly the place where we could outline what the difference between those three things are and have a real child focus to it. And within that comes from that you know, promoting that guidance and an expectation within that, I think would be the really good singular place to kind of capture all those things. And then, as I say, for me, it would be the assurances that we have that expectation, we set that expectation. I think it's absolutely something that we can promote as we develop child-friendly Herefordshire, but it's the assurance processes that then take place. And again, there is no one single place. This is a great session for having some of those assurances, but there are other places. Our CLT meetings, different service managers who, when you've got that guidance in place, being able to say, okay, let's give ourselves an assurance of, I mean, David's done a really good presentation around what they've done on the transport, for example. So it's the senior managers having that guidance and then self-assuring, and then places like Scrutiny having that critical friend assurance. So I think there's a range of levels of assurances that could come well from that singular document if we develop that a bit wider than that single guidance, but as I've just described.
And then I guess following through on the one hand, I hear we don't want to kind of place some requirement that every time you speak to a child, it's put into a central pot. But one of my duties as a city councillor is to attend the City Youth Council, and I was there when Tony was there, and there was a very strong message from them about they feel that they have articulated clearly what the priorities of children and young people are in Hereford, and they are that there are not enough free things for teenagers and young people to do, that they have difficulty accessing transport that gets them to the places that they need, and that they're worried about the mental health of children and young people in the city. And then the council asks them to fill in questionnaires about transport or sense of place, which doesn't seem to have been taken into account the work that they've done and what they're articulating. And so how do we not get into what you're describing where we're creating a load of work, but how do we make sure that we're not asking children questions that we should already, and it may not be this service, may not even be this council that has the answer. So how can we bridge those two issues?
I think it's just by, trying to make sure that we have got that network of connections within and across the council. So, my role is well known. I'm a conduit for people sending me things. Equally, I'm not offering to review every single consultation that takes place. But of course, having that network where we can feed it in is really important. But like I say, that there is a range of things that we need to do, because that will be one group of children. We've consulted within children's services about children's priorities, but we've consulted with children who have been in care or are care leavers. They're another cohort of children. There will be a different cohort of children that live in different areas. There will be a different cohort of children who are different ages in terms of what they want. There will be a different cohort of children who are of different abilities in terms of what they want. And that's the challenge. And each of those, we've got some assurance that information is taking place in the SEND work, that within children's services, we're doing that with those particular vulnerable children, within particular market towns, you know, that consultation is taking place. So when we're looking at particular priorities for the council plan or the partnership plan, actually, I think knowing where we can reach out and where you can send those in will be helpful. So for the Children and Young People's plan for now next year, we are just starting to pull together what people know. So I've got a partnership around the table of that, of people, and absolutely asking them, what have you already got that we can pull in to identify some of these priorities of what's already happening. So I don't know if I've described that brilliantly, but that I don't think there is a simple, this is the way we do it. I think it is having those relationships and those networks and knowing where you can, you know, funnel things through, I think is what's helpful.
Just following that on, so I think pragmatically that probably makes sense. Everybody just needs to sort of talk to each other and use the networks. But I'm interested in how we get this to a political level where the cabinet has to make big political decisions about how it allocates resources. How do we get the voices of children and young people seen at that level if we are not sort of pooling what we know and just so it sort of makes sense at the service management level, but how do we get that the right information up to the cabinet and the council so that they can take it into account when they're making strategic decisions?
I think when we're developing the council priorities plans and the question is asked, where is the voice and the views of children, young people and families within this plan? Where is it? And that's the time when we can identify where the different strands have come, that those things have come from, and potentially identify any gaps. And that's also where we do that targeted consultation with children, young people across Herefordshire as well. So you might do a combination of these are the things that have come up with the priorities that this group have talked about, or this group, and actually on top of that, overlaying that, you know, a plan where we've talked to young people. I mean, I've not been part of one in Herefordshire, but in my previous authority, when we did the consultation around the priorities for the council, and I'm sure you do the same here, you know, there was a whole range of events that took place across the council. I have read actually what you're doing here. A whole range of events that took place across the council where people were able to contribute, and we overlaid that with what was coming from the specific groups or the specific service areas that people were able to link into, and that's what, you know, then informs the plan. I really think that you know, promoting our child-friendly Hereford is a really good way forward, because that's what keeps it on everybody's minds, and the challenge there on everybody's desk, as it were, or in everybody's role, as how have you thought about children and young people in this particular work that you're doing, and then it will get easier and easier because we will be doing that more automatically. Although I will keep saying I did feel, you know, yes, there's always more we can do, but actually it was a really good report to see that so much has taken place, and the voices and children, young people from all my council colleagues here, you know, I've worked really hard to try and make sure that we are doing that as well. So yeah, I think
there is Rosie, you wanted to come in, and then Lauren.
Thank you, Chair. Just to build on Tina's commentary, really, and absolutely agree that we're getting much better when it comes to those planning discussions as a CLT, as management teams, as service managers, to say we're the voices of children and young people in this, but we are also anticipating some developments to our internal service planning templates, very much focused on equalities in its broadest sense, not just looking at children and young people. So when it comes specifically to those service planning developments, goes back to your comment, Councillor Proctor, in terms of service planning itself and getting those priorities up the cabinet agenda. Those service planning templates will go into a lot more detail in relation to the widest range of protected characteristics that keeps us all honest in relation to saying these are how our considerations and our planning takes into the account the needs, aspirations, views of all of those individuals with protected characteristics, children, young people being one of them. So there are a number of related corporate developments that are sitting around and outside of our conversation today around children and young people that will absolutely, undoubtedly support the work that we're doing to progress at some pace.
Thank you. Lauren, did you have a view on that?
I just wanted to quickly add that involving external organisations I think is going to be really crucial, especially I think the idea of being child-friendly Herefordshire is absolutely fantastic. Can't welcome that strongly enough, and the idea that embedding voice absolutely doesn't just happen during formal consultation periods, that's crucial. A theme that we have as an organisation next year for our youth activity is democratic participation. What does that look like above and beyond voting? I have a personal belief and faith in things like citizens' assemblies and standing youth forums, and I know that they come with large costs, etc., but they can be this really quite transformative way of embedding young people's voices into kind of, for me, the key there is existing decision-making processes. I think that's really key, marrying what already exists and works for Herefordshire decision makers and bringing young people into that, not necessarily relying on one young person on a board as the representative. That's an awful lot to put on a young person's shoulders.
And I think what was really useful in Coventry was hearing about their youth parliament and how that fed into sort of child-friendly Cov and the policies. So I think it's an important point. Jess, did you want to come in?
Yes, please. So there's also the quality impact assessment that needs to be completed whenever we consider any policy changes as well. So that may not necessarily would we necessarily consider the voice of children, young people, but we would look at the impact on children, young people. So that is also something that is a part of council policy, and it's also something that needs to be considered in all of the documents that are sort of published. So you will see a section on equality in which any concerns of any of those children, young people who would come under the protected characteristic would need to be considered in any policy publication, really.
Is that something that we actually need to bring in, because we do have that under every report, but it's not specific about children and young people. So is that something that you're suggesting we need to incorporate?
So even though it's not specific, you don't necessarily spell out under that section whether you consider the children, young people as a demographic within that policy, how it impacts them. You do need to consider quality impact assessment, which is not necessarily all written out in that in what's published, but it's a background form that's sort of completed. The qualities officer within the council might be able to advise further on this, but it's a tool that needs to be like a screening tool that needs to be considered as to whether you've considered the impact on protected characteristics such as age.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Highfield, did you have a question?
Yes, I want to ask Lauren a question, if I may. First of all, the presentation at Ledbury was fantastic. I was very impressed with that. And if I understand my colleague Councillor Proctor's concern, is to look at how the feedback that we're getting, and there seems to be a lot of it, is actually being followed up. Are we actually acting upon what the young people are telling us? And one example that came out of that, and I hope you'll smile at this, the one thing that really came out of that is Greggs closes at 6. I would hope, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, has somebody from the town council gone back to Greggs and said, hey, could you open later? Has that happened or not?
I don't know, but I could probably find out. One of the things I think was really impressive is that the local community organisation leaders who've been involved in that Ledbury listening work have continued after our youth engagement work has ended. They have pledged to continue meeting as a stakeholder group, and I think they're now creating their own youth listening working group as part that will feed then into the town council. That issue about shops closing early, I think that's a really relevant point, because there was a laugh from a lot of the adults in the room that fish and chips is too expensive, but for those 700 young people, it really is. So I think it's a kind of taking the voices seriously when they are shared. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure we can find out.
Thank you very much. Just one final comment is that Toyota pioneered a policy whereby they get feedback through various methods from their 700,000 staff, And their policy is that if the recommendation, the feedback is neutral, i.e. it's neither positive nor negative as far as can be assessed for the company, but if it's neutral, they will accept it and go with it as a way of demonstrating their support for people who recommend things to them. And I would recommend that we take that approach too. If we're not sure it's going to be good or bad, we go with it because it supports the people who have made the recommendation, have taken the trouble to give the feedback to us.
Thank you. Oh, Tina, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to also say, I think that this also, for me, goes back to the differences between what's consultation, what's co-production and what's engagement, and the real importance of the feedback and being honest with children and young people. And, you know, things like, can the shop open later? Can the fish and chips be made cheaper for us? Can we get free coffees? You know, these things will come from young people. They're young people. They want cheaper fish and chips. They want Greggs to be open till 7 o'clock at night, and they want a place that they can go and have free Wi-Fi and free coffee. But the realities behind creating those for young people are not that simple, and we know that because somebody's got to pay for the cost gap for the fish and chips, somebody's got to pay for the Wi-Fi, somebody's got to pay for the staff to keep Greggs open later. Now, some of those things may well be able to be things that we can achieve. Other things, we need to make sure that we're going back to people and telling them, we heard what you said, but we can't do that, and this is the reason why. So that we're also having an honest conversation with them. And our starting point for that honest conversation is, this is consultation, so we are going to take your views into account, or this is co-production, so we're doing this together, or this is, we want your experiences so that we can know how we might do things better, and having that loop feedback. I think those are just important things that we need to take into account when we're working with the children and people.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, you had some questions?
Yes, I did, Chair, but I'm conscious that some of our officers are needing to leave us earlier than others, and I'd like to leap to talking a little bit about transport, because in a county as sparsely populated and rural as this one, sometimes young people have to travel quite a distance to be able to access places where they may want to meet their friends, go out and enjoy themselves, and that's not just about getting there, it's also about getting home again safely. So I'm wondering what we have been doing to try and understand what the transport issues are for young people in our county so far, and how doing that has helped to shape decisions that we've made about trying to address some of the problems that have been articulated.
I guess that falls with me. So I think, Councillor, what we laid out in the report is how we've tried to engage what are fairly dry subjects in terms of local transport plan. I don't think that's a terribly exciting way to sort of lead on that, but we have done some engagement on that. So we have tried to talk to young people, and I think what we hear is, as Councillor said earlier, actually young people want to be able to get around, and they want to be able to get around later in the evening for shops or whatever that might be. Where we are at the moment is, how do we make the consultation documents, which is part of what we're talking about here, more accessible for young people? I think the consultation document of the local transport plan isn't very exciting. I don't think many people think it's very exciting. So how do we engage young people better in stuff that I think is probably quite dry? And I don't know if I've got a good answer for that at the moment, but I think there's lots of people that I can talk to about how we might make that better. And I think that's true of the local cycling, walking and wheeling infrastructure plan as well. They are dry, strategic, statutory documents that we have to do as a council, because that's our funding window, if you like, for what we want to do, for how we access funding in the future. So we've done some engagement. As Tina said earlier, it's very much engagement, not consultation. So chatting to people, trying to get their views. And I think where we struggle is, how do we feed that back? Because not much of that is in our gift. about in terms of what we do for transport. You know, we don't run bus services, bus operators run bus services. We don't run train services, train operators run train services. We don't run taxi services, and so on and so forth. So what would be interesting for me is how do we feed that back to young people to say, we have heard what you said, because I think what you said about the city council would be, I'd be interested to, I didn't know they'd done that, didn't know that had happened. So that'd be really interesting, that actually, because I think if you're a young person, you don't care whether I've heard it or you've heard it, you know, it needs to be heard, doesn't it? So how do we make sure, so that would be an interesting recommendation, I would think, to Cabinet about how do we, that you, not to tell you what you would recommend to Cabinet, but one recommendation would be that people like me make a better job of actually not saying, oh, that's not our engagement, so we don't want to know about it. Actually, that's a general engagement. That's really interesting. That's the voice of young people. We want to play that in. And I guess that's then for us, specifically in transport, to play that back to our bus operators, rather than specifically, I mean, it needs to come through Cabinet, obviously, you know, that's not my decision, but how do we then get our bus operators to listen to that? Now we have, as I'm sure you've heard, there's some bus service improvement plan plus money that's come into Herefordshire, or is coming into Herefordshire, and we have started, I guess in a fairly modest way, because it's actually fairly modest sum, trying to extend some of the bus services, trying to run them a bit more into the evenings. And I can send you the details, I haven't got them in front of me, but I can send details that we are trying to do that. That's expensive, as we know. And that's not an excuse. It sounds like I'm trying to make an excuse. I'm really not. That it's just an expensive thing to do. As you said, Councillor, we've got a really low population. The way they work out generally the allocations is on a population basis. There's some other things that go on, but generally it's on a population basis. So we're trying to do more across a bigger area with less money than our neighbouring authorities have got. So I think an interesting recommendation for me would be, how do we play that voice that we're trying to capture of young people to the people that we're trying to influence to improve their services or change their services, and can we back that up with some resources such as a bus service improvement plan?
Thank you, and you know that's a really helpful response, and it kind of leads me nicely into a number of things I was wanting to try and pick up that have been raised in the responses that we've had to questions so far. I had a look at the information on the Understanding Herefordshire website in preparing for this meeting, just to sort of take a look at some of the stats that we've got and that we do put out there and share with people. And we've got 16% of the population in Herefordshire is under the age of 16. So that's a decent proportion of our overall population. And in our county plan, and sorry, it's the council plan now, and the delivery plan that it covers this current year, one of our objectives is stated as being support all children to have the best start in life. And one of the objectives underneath that is to ensure that the views and lived experiences of children and young people inform strategic intent and service delivery. And that's a great thing to be wanting to try and do. Thanks, Lauren, for being with us. And one of the reasons for having this as a sort of a scrutiny agenda item is really to say, where are we at on that journey? What are the experiences that we've had at trying to achieve that? What have we learned? And how do we progress in doing that better, building on that experience of our own and understanding whether there's experiences of others that can help to inform our journey moving forward? And I hate using both those terms. I've used them both in the same sentence. So apologies to everybody for that. We've had mention consultation, co-production and feedback. We've also had mention of, not having a single point that has to kind of organise and orchestrate and manage and control everything. And I think the objective that we've got in our council plan and in the delivery plan kind of speaks to the council wanting to do this as part of day-to-day business, as part of how we just work as a council, that we do this. And therefore, it shouldn't be, there shouldn't be a narrowing in the pipework that all of this has to go through. It has to be part of our culture, part of how we do things. But we, all of us, are not experts in doing that. So some of the things I've picked up are about, well, maybe there's some guidance that would be helpful, maybe there's some best practice, and there's going to be a range of doing things depending on the circumstances, depending on the kind of questions that we've got and the issues that we're trying to deal with in the now. And for me, listening to all of that was really helpful, and it speaks of the learning that we've gained to date. But I've got a question really, and it's not an either or one, but I think it's something that we need to reflect upon in terms of how we take things forward. That Lauren spoke about the longitudinal engagement that some of the rural media projects have with young people, and even where they are spot consultations on particular things or particular projects that they're running. The young people who engage with those projects come back to rural media time and time again and stay involved and get involved in other projects that they do because they've had fun, because they've enjoyed it, because they felt heard. And so there is that spot and longitudinal dimension to the way that young people are being engaged with through those creative and media-based projects. And then there's also something about a dedicated consultation activity, or do we have it embedded in how we just do things? And it isn't going to be necessarily capable for us to become expert at absolutely everything. So my question is really, from the experience that we've had in the different service areas who've engaged with young people, what is the takeaway in terms of how beneficial it's been to do very targeted type consultations, like we did with the local plan, having something that was specifically worded for young people, but the consultation took place when we were doing it, and our view, our way of engaging with young people was how it was, versus doing something that's maybe looking at the kind of things we want to find out from young people all the time, or the kind of things that we just want to know, and how we maintain that dialogue, not necessarily with the same young people, but, with representative cohorts of young people, that this just then become, as David was talking about, when I need to know about this, where do I go to find out what those young people's opinions are? Not necessarily because I sort them right now, but because we kind of know, because we've gathered that information and we're holding it in a way that makes it accessible to our officers. And I think, the work that the intelligence unit and Understanding Herefordshire does in terms of presenting not only our own information, but information that's come from central government and come from other sources, and we've just looked at it through the Herefordshire lens, is a really useful way in demonstrating how we're doing it now. But I think collectively there's an opportunity to integrate that knowledge now and say, how do we, in the context of our council plan and the objectives that we have to give children the best start in life and capture their views and lived experiences, to shape our services, what do we do next? And, have officers come to this meeting with some views on that?
Rosie, it looks like you've got a view.
Thank you, Councillor, and really timely question, because actually we're just now setting ourselves up for the process of reviewing our delivery plans within the council plan, and we will be working across service areas to look at the progress that we've made against the deliverables that we signed ourselves up to deliver. So now is our time for learning. Now is our time for going back and establishing and reviewing what we've done over the past 12 months across all services, not just children's services, in relation to capturing children and young people's voices. What were the processes that we tried? What worked well for children and young people? What can we learn by way of any evaluation that we did along the way? How can we demonstrate that we've made those impacts? And then our question is, what more do we need to do for the following year? Because I dare say that this is a priority and a deliverable that we wouldn't want to see just disappear. This needs to become core of what we do and how we develop as a council collectively, but also within services as well, as having everybody's voice, all of our citizens' voices supporting us to shape our services in ways meaningful to them. So your question is timely because we're just stepping into that review and learning process now. And what we will learn as part of that work as we work to review and develop our plans for the forthcoming year is how that will answer the what next question, I believe. So probably for us this afternoon, we're a little bit early to answer that, but we are stepping into that review and learning process, and we'll look forward to bringing back to you what we have learned, what we can build on and develop, and also what the successes were that we would like to do more of. I think a lot of our conversation this afternoon has talked a lot about best practice, good practice and toolkits, etc. I think really interesting to explore how we can develop our resources as an organisation as a whole in relation to engagement, participation, co-production as a whole. Again, there's some really lovely examples of work happening across different service areas. So, for example, the development of a co-production toolkit, a strategic approach to co-production for adult social care. What can we in children's social care learn from that process? Because whilst our cohorts that we'll be working with are different, the principles, the approach, the methodologies will resonate and will be the same. So we're not starting from scratch. We have some really good and exciting work happening that now we go into that delivery plan review process. We can capture the learning from, we can evaluate, we can share that learning and we can do more. So a really timely question, and we look forward to updating you throughout that review process in terms of what we found and what more we can do.
That's really encouraging, and you know, I echo the comments that were made by the director in terms of how good it was to see the examples that we've provided in the report here of work that's been going on in niche and particular areas of the council coming together in a single report. It's not the Director of Children's responsibility, it's all of our responsibility. And having set out the ambitions that the administration has in its strategic plans, it's really good as a member of this committee to have this opportunity to just look at where we're at on this and how far we've come and how well particular bits of the organisation have done in, you know, stepping into that space. So thank you.
Councillor Davis, you had a question. Oh, sorry. Somebody wanted to respond. Tina, would you just like to respond before Councillor Davis' question?
I was just, thank you, Councillor Harvey, for that. And I was just building on from Rosie's point as well. And we've kind of talked about, you know, in terms of the next steps, we've got some great examples. I know that people, when we say this is the expectation, their next question was, well, how can I do that? And we've got some really good examples. I agree with your point. I can't remember whether you said it or whether I've read it, but we can learn from the SEND services, the Partnership for SEND on co-production, great examples there in the term toolkit. We've got the toolkit that we can learn, as Rosie said, from adults. I think if we can get that guidance document in place, which is the basis for our understanding and our expectation, we can build on how well people have done even without that expectation being in place, and then support that with now the expectation's clear and the understanding's clear. Now here's the toolkits to enable you to do those things. I think that would be a really good step forward. And just again to say this is absolutely across the council, and thank you for that, but it's also across the council. But if we really push this for the child-friendly Herefordshire, we can gain lots of drive and traction for the wider partnership and the businesses and the community of Herefordshire as well. Again, helping them with the toolkits and you know, the guidance around how you can engage with local people, children and people in your area on these specific things. And I think that you know, we could get to a really, really good place here.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Sorry, I need to step back to Dave and transport, if I may, Chair. When we think about children in rural areas, they have a bus pass to get into Hereford, to go to school, quite a few of them. Now, when they have this bus pass, it seems like they have to use it at a certain time after school. But now that we've got bus companies agreeing to stay longer, can that bus pass not allow children to come home from school 2 hours later, for example? Thinking about the mental health side of things, they with their friends all day long, they come back into a rural area and they've left their friends behind, and then there is nothing for them to involve in some rural areas. Is this something that you can elaborate on, or is it outside your brief?
When I started in January, Councillor, it blew me away that there was a time frame on it. I assumed my daughter has a bus pass. We even lost year. My daughter has a bus pass. She can use it 24/7. Not that you can get a bus 24/7, but you know, that's the principle. So I am relatively astonished that there is in place a time limit on these things. So yes, absolutely, we're meeting with bus operators very early in January. That will be on the table about how we abolish that time frame, because I don't understand why we would. Well, I don't understand why it's there. So, sorry.
And weekends, sometimes.
Yeah. So on weekends. So the.
But actually improving weekends with children on bus passes.
So I think one of the issues I think probably was there was no need because there wasn't a bus that was later, arguably. But I think as we try and expand the network, if we can, I mean, there are other issues that I realise the Scrutiny Committee is not looking at the moment, but about how we improve buses and bus services more generally, then it makes obvious sense to take any of those time limits off and just say, yeah, because we want people on buses, because that's going to help them to run, that's going to help things like nighttime economies, that's going to do things for economic development, and that's going to do things for jobs. So yes, I'm not going to sit, there's no way I'm going to sit here and defend it.
If I can just interrupt there, because actually it's such an interesting topic, the bus topic, and I think it's one of the things that the Scrutiny Management Board we would like to look at in terms of buses and public transport, and to not necessarily go sort of down this particular rabbit hole right now, but it is no. It's really important, and there are sort of examples of other bus companies that do something different. So I think it's a really important conversation to have, but it would probably take up the rest of the afternoon. So if we can sort of prioritise that specific conversation, especially in relation to the additional funding that's coming. But I think that the sort of wider questions around the consultation and how the information that we have on users, etc., is used is really important, and I think will really help inform how your service area goes forward. And I think also that discussion around wider partners in the county, once we have the information, how we actually use our sort of leverage position as a local authority to actually have that broader discussion with other partners and engage other partners in sort of stepping forward, especially if we've got, we're looking towards child-friendly Herefordshire. The transport issues are going to be absolutely crucial. Thank you for raising the question specifically. And Councillor Proctor, am I right in saying that that is something that Scrutiny Management Board will be looking at specifically?
Well, specifically, I think you and I and possibly the chair of another Scrutiny Management Board are going to meet to discuss how best to look at that.
Okay, thank you. in terms of questions, I'm just wondering sort of where we've got to. Do any other councillors have any questions at the moment? It is 15:24. I'm just wondering if there was anything from public health that you wanted to sort of to bring in with regard to the discussion that we've had. I think one of the issues that I think we're all waiting for is what happens with regard to the sort of mental health survey that's been done of young people, and I think there's some information coming out about that later, if I'm right, and also the well-being survey. There was some question around, obviously not going down in the specifics of the survey, but when are we likely to see the outcome of that, and have we got any sort of headlines that we should have on our radar?
The Children Wellbeing Health and Wellbeing Survey that has been taking place during the summer with our schools and colleges. The results for that are being processed as we speak, and our timeline on that is that we should be able to present some findings, some headlines from that by January. In relation to some of the discussion that's taken place and public health's role, we've got a couple of really good examples where we have consulted, especially with regards to service redesign and the recommissioning of services. So as part of a commissioning process, when a contract comes to an end and we need to recommission it, part of that commissioning cycle involves consultation. So it involves consultation with our service users. And a really good example of this was when we recommissioned last year sexual health services in Herefordshire, and we did some consultation with young people with regards to what they needed from a sexual health clinic either in Herefordshire and across the county. And we did some focus groups with some young people actually in the sexual health clinic itself, and some of the aspirations and the views that came out of that you wouldn't necessarily pick up from our online survey, purely because they weren't necessarily interested in completing an online survey, or they weren't in the right place at the right time to complete it. Obviously there is some stigma with regards to being seen walking into a sexual health clinic, which is, you know, it's a national problem. We are getting better at it, but there is an issue there around that, which we're very aware of. So we introduced QR codes. So when young people were either in the sexual health clinic or had happened to see the survey, there was a QR code so they could do the survey on their phone, etc. So we were very aware that there had to be more than one way of consulting with them, because it was vital that we wanted to know what their needs were. So for example, if you've got a young person that lives out at Kinkton and wants an emergency hormone contraception, for example, it is unlikely that they will be able to get a bus and get into the sexual health clinic to pick up that drug within the 72 hours that's needed in order to prevent a pregnancy. And the consultation that we had with those young people was that they would not go to their GP surgery because, of course, as you all know, when we live in Herefordshire, our neighbours, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers are probably close friends with the doctors and the secretaries in these establishments. So it wasn't discreet enough. So that was really useful information, because what we were able to do is, when we developed the new service, we were able to ensure that emergency hormone contraception, just as one very simple example, was available in local pharmacies, which was slightly more discreet. One of the other things that came out of the consultation with young people around sexual health was also that they wanted a young person's clinic. They didn't want to walk in with all the rest of us that go to our sexual health clinic for one thing or another. They wanted it to be more sort of with young people, made them feel more comfortable. And also they wanted it on a Wednesday afternoon in Herefordshire, because you're probably aware that the sixth form colleges and the colleges have half day on Wednesday. and usually it's sports and activities in the afternoon. And that's what we did, that's what we built in. We built in a young person's clinic on a Wednesday afternoon, so they, when they come out of college and university, etc., and they've got that free afternoon, that's an ideal time for them to go, and it is used. And that's just a brief example of how consultation, when you're planning service redesign, can have a real impact when you're writing the service spec.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Councillor Proctor?
Yeah, I think that's really great example of some stuff. It just highlights more stuff for this guidance document that we're clearly going to recommend, because there's sort of thrown in there, there's also, which we haven't talked about, is kind of user research, so about understanding your users and designing a service to meet your users' needs, and also the kind of power of qualitative data collection rather than quantitative data collection. And that's something else that I don't know as a manager how I get sort of supported to know whether I should be doing a survey or whether I should be doing some qualitative data collection, and who has the expertise to go and commission qualitative research, or just do it ourselves. So that I don't think that's a question really. That's I'm writing your guidance document in my head.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, Tilly, do you have anything that you would like to contribute for sort of having followed the discussion this afternoon?
Not overly. It's difficult. I was explaining to Daniel the purpose of the advocacy service is to make sure the child's voice is heard, but we act on what the child is saying. So if they wanted to share an opinion on buses, anything to do with children's services, anything like that, we would take that forward for them, but we wouldn't approach them on a particular topic. So we wouldn't engage them or consult with them on that basis. They are very vocal on certain topics, and then that's raised with the right professionals, but we wouldn't be forthcoming in approaching them with a particular subject or topic.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm just conscious online also, Emily or Zoe, is there anything that sort of following this discussion that you'd like to contribute if you're still there? So, yeah. Oh, should we go with Zoe first and then Emily? Thanks.
Hi. Yes, I think I just wanted to reiterate some of the practice that I think happens within commissioning. I think we've evidenced some good practice, but we do need to learn how we're going to do it more consistently across the whole of our service area. But just to give you a quick practical example, recently we have gone out to tender for a new children's home project. And as part of that, young people were engaged with to ask their views about how they felt safe in a provision, what made them feel safe, what were they looking for in a good children's home provision. And we worked alongside the partnership worker to do that and to use his experience of consultation and asking the questions in the right way. We used that to inform our specification. The young people read the specification and again were engaged to understand. We tried to reduce jargon, etc. They developed a question for part of our procurement, and they responded. They scored the question as part of the tender, and then they also provided feedback on what they thought the tender presentation was like, what they thought was good, what they thought was bad. And we're using that feedback as part of our mobilisation plan. So, for instance, one of their questions was, in the development of the new residential provisions, the houses, could there be an opportunity for young people to do DIY and work experience? So that was raised, it was looked at, and whilst that specifically wasn't felt to be something the provider could offer for health and safety insurance reasons, it has been taken up by the relevant service manager, who is working with building providers who may be able to be contracted to do that piece of work, and therefore offer the opportunity to the young people. So I think that was a good example of a creative outcome. And also, you know, we're working with them around communication strategies and what information the new provider will offer to children and young people who may be living there in the future. So I think we're in early days, but we are trying really hard to be responsive and to give that feedback and to learn.
That's excellent. Thank you, Zoe. That's really helpful to know and to put that in context as well. Emily, did you want to come in?
Yeah, a little bit to expand on some of the things that Lauren talked about looking at creative ways to engage. When we did the Let's Talk project, which then fed into the early help and prevention plan, we worked with community groups, asking them to gather the data. So for them to look at really creative ways to engage with children and families. I think we did about 18 different events and 12 focus groups through those community groups. But a lot of the feedback we had was that the children and families were much more comfortable feeding into those community groups. So where there were activities happening that they were taking part in any way, where there were community leaders and volunteers that they were really comfortable with, it was a place they were happier sharing that information. So I think that's something that we could obviously consider as we do other projects and other engagement pieces, is how we can use those community organisations that we've got really good relationships with to ask them to work with the children and families to gather that information. And we do it really regularly. We do the holiday activity and food programme that we deliver for the Department of Education, and we use feedback each and every time we run the programme to then look at how we map out the next one and make sure we're including different activities that the families want as part of that.
Thanks, Emily. And I think that again, it's a really good example of the collaboration and how well that can work, and you know, between that and the commissioning and actually the potential of of sort of what we've been discussing today, I think is really positive. I think unless anybody's got any further questions, let's take. Oh yes, Councillor Highfield. Then we'll have a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back.
I'll make it short. I think just an observation, first of all, that some of the things that young people want are very obvious, and I'd like to see clear signs that we're actually doing it. We mentioned transport. They want accessible and affordable places to socialise. That's part of an important thing for their lives. So I'd like to see evidence that we're actually processing that. The question I have is to go back to the capturing the diverse voices of children, and particularly those who are homeschooled. There are a number of them in the county, and I believe that the education services, the education authorities, have regular contact with the families that are homeschooling. Are we using that avenue to maintain feedback in other areas with homeschooled children?
I'm not sure that the education services have what you and I might determine to be regular contact. They do have contact, but that's about the managing that provision and overseeing the provision of EHE, isn't it? And I'm not sure that they are the right mechanism to try and engage families to make sure that they're being involved in specific consultations.
Yeah, I agree with that, and
yeah.
I wasn't recommending it. I'm just saying,
yeah.
what else have we got?
I'm just trying to,
Yeah, what else have we got that engages with homeschooled children?
I suppose the one area of consultation that they miss out on is what we do through schools. Otherwise, they are children and young people of the community, like every other child. It's only what with the surveys and communications that we specifically do through schools that they actually, as home-educated children, young people, miss out on. And maybe, and we've definitely got those links, haven't we, within the council to all of those children. We've got their names, addresses and emails and things for their homes and their families. And so maybe we just need to think about when we're doing it through schools, any particular surveys through schools, and as Emily's talked about as well, is that we add those specific links in and that they go directly to them, because they're the ones that they're missing out on. So that would be, I don't think that would be too difficult to try and achieve.
Yeah, I'd ask that would be done. That shouldn't be too difficult. So thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions right now? No? Thank you. So let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back to what our recommendations are after that. I'm not sure if anybody needs to leave. Please feel welcome to leave, and thank you very much for your contributions. It's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you. back on. That's great. Thank you very much. It's been a really, really useful conversation. I'm just wondering if Councillor Powell, if you would like to sort of have a final word before we look at the recommendation. Sorry to pass that on you.
I think you summarised it really, but it has been a fascinating discussion, hasn't it? Has it? The director made the point that if I'm honest, I was pleasantly surprised to some degree by the extent of how much effort has gone into consultation. I think we would all acknowledge perhaps there's a bit more that can be done on co-production, but I think there's also a need within it all to be honest. That sometimes we may well be communicating, or we are genuinely consulting, and in certain cases we may be genuinely co-producing. You mentioned at the start, Chair, our visit to Coventry, and that was I reflect back, and it was almost a missed opportunity for a few minutes yesterday to have a conversation with our Coventry colleagues who are further along that child-friendly journey, just to see what they do. But it's been fascinating, and I look forward to not only the recommendations but how then we move forward and embed this in a bit more of a detailed way.
Thank you. So we've come up with a recommendation, two recommendations. So if we can hear from the scrutiny officer, please, about those recommendations.
Thank you very much, Chair. The recommendations of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee today concerning children's voices in council policy are as follows. That Herefordshire Council, 1, review and promote good practice in soliciting, capturing and sharing the voice of the child across the service areas of the council, partners and stakeholders, ensuring that A, this practice builds on the good examples of engagement and consultation which have been developed in some areas of council business and by outside organisations. B, children and young people are involved in that process, and C, it engages with other services, town and city youth councils and other youth projects to ensure it understands perspectives children and young people have articulated. And 2, ensures that its scrutiny committees embed the need to consider the voice of children and young people when carrying out its work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody have comments about this? Councillor Highfield.
Yes, well written, Daniel. I think it's nearly there. I just wanted to see a tiny bit more emphasis on actually, where possible, doing what the children are asking us to do. So we are wanting to incorporate, that's good, incorporate in our, but there's nothing in there that says that where possible we should actually act upon it. And I wonder if that could be worded in there somehow.
Director.
Yeah, I think there's a fourth bullet point there, as you say. Maybe the children and young people are involved, or extending the second one, the children and young people are involved in that process. Where possible, their views and ideas are implemented, and where not possible, they receive feedback to understand why those things haven't been taken forward. There's kind of that finishing the loop that we also came out of the discussion as being really important, didn't it?
That would be perfect for me, yeah.
Thank you.
Daniel's doing that. I guess it won't be appropriate for us as a recommendation, but correct me if I'm wrong. But the presentation at Ledbury, for those who don't know, they did a survey about what young people need, and then they got 4 young people to present it, and they also had dance and poetry and music to sort of entertain us at the same time as making fun of some of the findings. It was quite brilliant. I'd love to see that happen in every market town. It was done through the schools and through local bodies. It was such a good thing. Tony, you were there. It was such a good thing. I think it would be really valuable. I know that's even more feedback, but it was specific to their Ledbury problem, and there probably are different. Tina commented earlier, there are children of different backgrounds and different issues. If we did that, something like that, in every market town, I think it'd be brilliant.
Thank you, Councillor Highfield. It was really, really good, and Emily possibly through Talk Community, because Talk Community was involved in that. I think if Emily can kind of take that on board and through the work that's happening, it would be really great. Councillor Cornthwaite, you wanted to say something.
It's just a question, really. When we work on the other scrutiny committees, we know that when we put forward the summaries at the end, they're off to the cabinet. Where does this go?
As far as I can see, none of these recommendations sit outside of the council's policy framework, as defined by the council, sorry. Therefore, they would go to the portfolio holder for a response. The portfolio holder on this occasion being Councillor Powell.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got that amendment to the recommendation. So do you need to go through the whole recommendation again?
Regrettably, yes. The adopted recommendations. Well, first of all, are you happy with the wording that's there? Okay, marvellous. Okay, right. The recommendation that David?
Can I just ask a question before you run through that? And that is, do we need to, this is giving guidance to across the council, even though it's going to be directed at Ivan, Councillor Powell. Do we need to put something in there that children's services should be, children and young people services should be used as the centre of excellence for this, interrogating information or gathering information as guidance for those other scrutiny committees? I'm just thinking this cohort is potentially, or Tina and the team are the ones who are the experts within the area, and therefore putting that in that they should engage with young people, perhaps if they don't know how to or don't have the expertise to get the best information, it may be beneficial to come from Children and Young Services.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Proctor and then Councillor Harvey.
I see what you're saying, but I think that is implicit in reviewing and promoting good practice. The good practice isn't unique to children's services, so I don't think we need to. I think the course of the discussion has highlighted there is really good practice in children's services. We don't need to put it in the recommendations, is my view.
Councillor Harvey.
Yes, echoing Councillor Proctor's point, I mean, the director made it clear that, you know, we're not looking for a narrowing in the pipework or a single point of contact on this. What we want to do is embed this in how the council does things. And actually, the intelligence team are experts in capturing, managing, you know, consulting, gathering data generally, and they're available to all areas of the council if they are engaged with. And I think, you know, looking at what best practice is may well, you know, indicate that engaging, you know, more parts of the council actually seeking their advice early on in a consultation process would be a good idea. But I wait to see what comes about as a result of the recommendations we make. Director.
And as you say, the recommendation will come to Councillor Powell's lead member, and he'll pass it on to me as well. And certainly we'll work with Jess's team to update that guidance and policy, and we'll make sure those toolkits and those best practices, and some of them in the report, and there are others that we will absolutely put into there. And then I think, what we will then do is it'll be the importance about the launch of that guidance and the policy, so that everybody is aware of it, and that's something that I know we'll take on. I will take on lead on in terms of that officer-led, and I know Councillor Powell will take it on in terms of that political lead, so that we can launch and highlight awareness of that expectation and that the existence of that kind of policy and guidance.
That's wonderful, thank you. So is everybody happy? Yep. So should we read through the recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. The revised recommendations that you'll be voting on are as follows. That Herefordshire Council, 1. Review and promote good practice in soliciting, capturing and sharing the voice of the child across the service areas of the council, partners and stakeholders, ensuring that A. This practice builds on the good examples of engagement and consultation which have been developed in some areas of council business and by outside organisations. B. Children and young people are involved in that process. C. Their ideas and wishes are adopted where possible, and where not possible, the reasons for that are explained. And D. It engages with other services, town and city youth councils, and other youth projects to ensure that it understands perspectives children and young people have articulated. 2. Ensures that its scrutiny committees embed the need to consider the voice of children and young people when carrying out its work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, let's vote on those. Everybody happy?
Councillor Powell.
Oh, Councillor Powell, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. I don't mean this to sound churlish, it's genuine. Given, we understandably have used professional language, I wonder if we, not necessarily now, but I wonder if we might come up with a children and young people's friendly version of that statement so that they will understand what they can expect from the council moving forward.
Absolutely, I think that's a good idea. Is everybody supportive of that? Thank you. Do we need to include that in the recommendation?
No, I think that's perfectly within your gift to stick on your to-do list, to write a version of that and to share as however you see fit. So we'll put it on our to-do list, no recommendation required.
Okay, great. So we'll put that on our action list. Great, thank you. Okay, any other comments on the recommendation before we vote on it? No. Everybody supportive of the recommendation? Wonderful. Thank you very much. That's excellent.
Now we've done that. One of those was that the scrutiny committee should incorporate blah, blah, blah. We need a young person on this committee.
Wow.
To set an example.
Okay, let's bear that as, let's put that in the minutes as an action point. I think we need to look at ways in which, if we engage a young person on the scrutiny committee, because one of the difficulties is that we hold our committee during school time. That's one of the difficulties. Potentially what we need to do is find a way to engage young people in the work of the scrutiny committee. Perhaps we can put that on our work programme. If everybody's agreed, we've got.
We're required to look at ways of doing it now because we just agreed a recommendation. So we've got to find a way of getting that directly.
They do attend the cooperative parenting panel and can feed in the cooperative parenting panel. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do anything else, but there is that feed-in.
Director, have you got a view?
So 2 points. The children and young people that attend the corporate parenting panel are specifically children and young people in care and care leavers, and that's what they're interested in. And I don't think, I understand why you're suggesting, but I don't think that we could request or expect that of them to be the wider voice. Which takes me to my second point, which is I think what we've just described and had a long time discussing and looking at the evidence of, it's not possible for one person, young person, or even two or even three, to represent the voice of children, young people of all ages, of all abilities, and of all sectors of geographical residence within Herefordshire. I think the link between scrutiny could look at where there are other forums of children and young people, like Youth Council, for example, though they themselves are a specific group of young people that come together for a shared interest, but they may well be have a shared interest in on being your next people. But having, looking at where some of those groups sit, and how we might connect with those over different agenda items, I think might be a better way forward than thinking that if we've got 2 or 3 young people sat at scrutiny, we will be able to say the voices of children and young people are represented. And like we said before, if when you're doing scrutiny items, you're requesting the assurance and information as to how the voices of children and young people specific to that particular topic have been elicited and taken into account, I think that's a better way of making sure you capture a much wider audience.
Thank you. I think at the moment let's continue with our exploration of the different groups of young people and bring this that connection between the scrutiny committee and the scrutiny committees, because there are other areas also, you know, that they've got a particular interest. I mean, transport was the one that comes up time and time again. So let's make sure that we continue that engagement. Yes.
Sort of, if looking at that recommendation anyway, I think that solely falls onto me really to provide a response to that in due course. So I think that's really on me to look right across the council, right across the scrutiny committees, and how we embed that going forward. So I think there's a long discussion to be had there.
And when you're doing that, it doesn't have to be Tina, it doesn't have to be a 14 or 15-year-old. It can be a 23-year-old, somebody who's youngish, who got the younger person's viewpoint on what's going on in the county, because we're old farts, most of us. Yeah. Let's face fact, we are, because of the nature of the way that the council works. So if we get the younger person's input, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. If we note that, thank you, Councillor Highfield. Right, can we just move on to the item about the work programme? So it's to consider the draft programme for Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee for the rest of 24-25. Now, I've actually shut my, there it is. Thank you. So we've got a couple of briefings, and then we've got on the 21st of January, we've got the send item. Now I think that's perfect timing.
Chair, I think the director might want to say something about this.
Okay, so we'll go back to the director.
Sorry, it was just trying to be helpful. I'm sure people are aware that we have currently got our SEND inspection, our full inspection taking place. So we will have the outcome of that inspection probably early January, if I'm going to guess. All of the things that are kind of listed there will be in some way incorporated into the inspection of our SEND services. And I just wonder whether it might be easier to have that item as an overview and feedback on the outcome of the SEND inspection and its recommendations.
That makes sense. So that means probably we'd have to put back this for a month, because by the time
I think that's most of it's going to be largely incorporated, if I'm honest.
But when will that come in? Because this is supposed to be on the 9th of January, isn't it?
So we get our informal feedback on the 6th of December. So I'm
21st, so we can fit it in then, I suppose.
I think so. It's a bit like the Ofsted inspection. As long as we get it back before scrutiny actually takes place, we can do an overview report that refers to the report. Yes. Is that all right? Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. So we'll just have to amend the work programme accordingly. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that I thought potentially we need to bring in is the Safeguarding Partnership Annual Review, and there is the item in March on. Sorry, I can't actually read the. Sorry. Child exploitation. Thank you. So I thought that potentially that would be a good time to bring the partnership, the annual review, to the meeting, depending on discussions with the scrutineer. But I think it's highly likely that we would at least want to see the progress that the partnership has made, and that might be a good opportunity to do that. Is everybody in agreement with that? Councillor Harvey.
Yes, sorry, Chair. I mean, when we've had these partnership annual reports to us previously, you know, we've expressed frustration as a committee that they have come months after the close of the year and long after they've been produced, and you know that means that we're going to be at least 4 months, 5 months maybe, after this report has been produced before we're having it on our work programme. Could we not, as a committee, at least receive a briefing on the report sooner than that, so we can at least bear the content of that report in mind when we're undertaking other scrutiny activities, please?
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I think that we have requested a briefing with Kevin Crumpton, the scrutineer. We have approached him, so that is in motion, and we will continue pursuing that. But if we put it on the draft work programme for for that meeting, at least it's in. But if we have a briefing beforehand, which has been requested, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that because it is actually in the public domain also, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. The other item that I wanted us to potentially look at was the mental health needs assessment, and I'm just wondering where we might be able to fit that, given that it hasn't actually sort of been published yet, but potentially we need to put that in at some point on the work programme.
I think that might warrant a sort of discussion separate to this meeting. Just, I mean, not just a question of where we might do this, but the objectives for that meeting. So perhaps some time to develop that, and we can place that into sooner rather than later, and we can place that into the December edition of the work programme to alert officers that it's coming.
Okay, all right. So if we, yes, Director.
Just a potentially helpful suggestion. So you're talking about the emotional health and wellbeing survey that's been done that Emily was talking about earlier, that's coming out in January. That's what you're talking about, isn't it?
There is that one. I did pick up also there is an actual mental health needs assessment. So it's not the quality of life report,
okay.
but there is, I believe, there's a mental health needs assessment coming through.
So both of those reports to see together would be really helpful. The only reason I'm looking at it is because again, as people may know, that our monitoring visit Ofsted inspection focused on exploitation, just gone. So on the 6th of December we will have a report published which has gone into significant review in detail around our exploitation. So a lot of what you will hear in the March session will be what you can read quite succinctly, to be honest, in the Ofsted report. And given that they are an external independent body, I would hope that you would get some assurances when you read that report about what you've seen. So whether or not your March meeting to bring some things forward would be that emotional health and well-being, quality of life and mental health survey as your big agenda item. I don't know whether that might be more valuable.
Is everybody happy for us to put that in as the sort of backup, given that we can actually deal with?
I mean, I'm more than happy to do the exploitation. We've got it all there. It's all done. It's just the added value of scrutiny, looking at that 2 months after Ofsted have done their 2-day scrutiny of it.
I think that's an absolutely fair challenge there from the Director of Children's Services. What I would say is that if you're going to look at those surveys, it might be useful to ask yourself what you want to get out of those meetings. If it is just around as a learning experience in the first instance, they might be best placed as briefings for the committee separate to scrutiny. And I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is perhaps, again, it might just be worth taking a little bit of time, perhaps outside of the meeting, to think about what objectives you want out of all those 3 items, and then determining the best way to look at them, allow the horse to lead the cart, as it were.
Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, could we please look at having a workshop then as a committee to look at that? And see how we bring that forward, rather than trying to sort it out now.
Okay, agreed. If we can sort that out, and we'll look at the work programming, which is everybody happy with that, Councillor Harvey?
Yeah. And could I add another thing to that workshop to look at? I see we do have a briefing on schools attainment in February, but I'm just conscious that our work programme is very skimpy, if not missing entirely, the subject of education, and I'd just like to make sure that we cover in the workshop, considering that area, seeing as it is a significant responsibility that the council holds, not just for education per se, but also its responsibility for the maintenance and upkeep and improvement of our school buildings.
Thank you. I had that on my list as well, alongside elective home education and the virtual school. So perhaps we can look at education. And the other one, again, this is just for discussion at that meeting is about poverty proofing social work and how that sits alongside the neglect strategy. We haven't actually looked at the neglect strategy, and possibly sitting that alongside sort of poverty would be helpful. Okay, so those are items for us to consider on our work programming session, which is to be decided. Everybody happy? Anybody want to make any other comments on that now? No, great. All right, so that brings us to the end of our meeting. The date of the next meeting is the 21st of January. We have a couple of briefings before then, which hopefully are in your diaries. I'd like to thank you all for attending. Like to thank you for the discussion. I think it was particularly useful. And can I ask that unless you have any formal business, sorry, this is all attendees other than council members and officers, well, we all are, to exit the plough lane site. Can I check with